Were blindsided by a rain dump that swept through the super city, collapsing roofs and flooding schools and businesses. Should they stay or should they go? We talked to businesses about what should happen with vaccine passes and mandates. And the price of protesting. Christchurch Council chases anti-mandate protesters for $50,000. So how does the bill break down? We'll check it out, and you can check us out on Sky, Channel 83.
RNZ News at 5 o'clock. Good afternoon. Ahi Marie ko Evie Ashton tēnei. The government will send body armour, helmets and vests to Ukraine, as well as $5 million to NATO to help bolster the nation's defence against Russia. The funding will primarily go to the NATO Trust Fund, which is providing fuel, military rations and first aid kits to the embattled European country. Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern says she spoke to Ukraine's Prime Minister over the weekend.
At the conclusion of my call with the Ukrainian Prime Minister, I noted that New Zealand may not be the largest country, but we were standing ready to do what we could. His response was a reminder of what solidarity means. He said, "There are no bigger or smaller countries, there are only those that react."
The move is a shift from New Zealand's humanitarian focus, but stops short of directly sending weapons. Ukraine has rejected a Russian demand to surrender the besieged southern city of Mariupol before the deadline set by Moscow. The Deputy Prime Minister, Irina Vereshchuk, says there's no question of soldiers laying down their arms. The Defence Ministry in Moscow admits that a terrible humanitarian catastrophe is unfolding in Mariupol, as the BBC's Lise Doucette reports.
The precise Russian demand is that residents and troops should leave the city by 5 a.m. And if they do not, they will face military tribunals. It is a very serious threat, but such has been the life of the people of Mariupol, in a city which is 90% flattened, a city of mass graves, that an assistant to the mayor tonight told the BBC they would carry on as normal tomorrow.
4 people have been found dead in a dangerous search and rescue operation off North Cape after a fishing charter boat sank last night. 1 person is still missing from the vessel, called Enchanter. Jake McKee reports.
3 of the deceased were found this morning and a 4th body was retrieved this afternoon. In total, there were 10 people on board the fishing charter and 5 who were rescued alive have since been discharged from Kaitaia Hospital. Search efforts for the 10th person are happening on land, air and sea with the involvement of the Coast Guard, Police and the Defence Force. The Transport Accident Investigation Commission has also opened an inquiry into the incident. A protection order has been placed on all boat remains and anyone who finds debris should report it to police.
A heavy rain warning is in place for the eastern North Island after a thunderstorm dumped a month's worth of rain over Auckland. Met Service says 70 to 100 millimetres could fall in Bay of Plenty, with an hourly peak of 40 millimetres. In Auckland, intense rain caused widespread surface flooding and dozens of fire crews spent the afternoon attending hundreds of calls. As it tracked south over Waikato, the storm lost intensity. Forecaster Lewis Ferris says the worst is over. Aucklanders have been picking up the pieces after the short, sharp deluge damaged homes, businesses and vehicles. Jay Gourakar says it was a slow trip to work through floodwaters this morning and he's now concerned about his car.
The car is making funny sounds, so fingers crossed, nothing too hectic. So maybe the brakes or maybe the underside of the engine or whatever is a bit soaked.
A GNS volcanologist says pressure building in Mount Ruapehu could lead to an eruption, but could also pass without incident. Dr. Craig Miller says the Central North Island volcano's alert level has been raised to 2 from 1 because of tremors since the middle of last week.
So there's something kind of getting in the way in the middle that's kind of blocking this gas flow, and that's what we're concerned about, is that it could be building up a kind of a pressurization, which, if that failed catastrophically, it could lead to an eruption. But it could equally dissipate as well.
Craig Miller says the tremors are typically caused by the flow of hot gases into the shallower part of the volcano. Mount Ruapehu had a series of eruptions in 1995 and 1996. To sport, and high jumper Hamish Kerr says his bronze medal at the Indoor World Champs in Belgrade shows he belongs among the top echelon in the sport. Kerr is the first New Zealander to win an Olympic or World Championship high jump medal, equalling his personal best to finish third equal with Olympic champion Gianmarco Tamberi.
I showed again that I'm really capable of competing against those guys when it really matters. So, obviously I tied with the Olympic champion, but the two guys ahead of me have never won global medals either. So it's kind of like the new kids on the block coming through, showing the old ones how it's done.
Scott McLaughlin has had to settle for second after being overtaken on the final bend of the latest IndyCar race in Texas. McLaughlin, who won the opening race in Florida last month, led for much of the race, only to be overtaken by Penske teammate Joseph Newgarden on the final turn. Fellow New Zealander Scott Dixon was fifth. The All Whites are doing all they can to stay healthy as COVID-19 continues to rock the Oceania World Cup qualifying tournament in Qatar. Vanuatu have had to withdraw from the tournament while the Cook Islands were unable to field a side for their second match. Both teams are in Group A, with New Zealand and the three other sides in Group B yet to be affected. Coach Danny Hay admits what's happening on the other side of the draw is a concern, but says they're doing daily rapid antigen tests and keeping in a tight bubble at the team hotel. New Zealand play Fiji tomorrow morning. And in ANZ Premiership netball action tonight, the Steel hosts the Mystics in Invercargill. That's the news.
Heavy rain batters the country.
We've had around about as high as 80 to 90 millimetres of rain falling in just 1 hour, which is pretty extreme.
Hitting the north especially hard.
It was a wild night. We had thunder and lightning and torrential downpours.
And a dramatic rescue at sea.
A number of people are missing and a significant search is underway, as is a rescue operation off the North Cape.
With you rain or shine, morning report weekdays from 6 on RNZ National.
And we're funded through New Zealand On Air. You're on Checkpoint with Lisa Owen next. Right now, the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Tuesday. Northland, Auckland, Waikato and Coromandel Peninsula, partly cloudy with a few showers. Waitomo, Taranaki and the Central High Country, also Bay of Plenty and Gisborne. Rain with heavy and possibly thundery falls, easing to a few showers from the afternoon or evening. Rain is returning to Taranaki, Coromandel and the Bay of Plenty tomorrow night. Whanganui to Wellington, also Hawke's Bay and Wairarapa. Rain spreading south, then clearing tomorrow morning. Scattered afternoon and evening showers inland tomorrow. Nelson and Marlborough, rain possibly heavy, easing tomorrow. Rain at times for Bulla and Westland. Cloud increasing for Canterbury, North Otago, Dunedin and Clutha. Rain is developing this evening, then gradually clearing later tomorrow. For Central Otago, Southland and Fiordland, fine apart from areas of inland valley fog. And for Te Kohu, the Chatham Islands, cloudy today, fine tomorrow. The time is 7 minutes past 5. I'll be back with the news headlines at 5:30.
Kia ora rā e ho, tēnā koutou katoa, no mai haere mai ki Checkpoint I tēnei rā, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Tonight, a major search operation is still underway after a fishing boat tragedy in the far north. 4 people have been confirmed dead after a charter boat sank in a fierce storm. 5 people were taken to hospital as the search continues for one last passenger. We'll go live to the far north shortly, but first, a Monday morning storm surge caught many Aucklanders off guard today, with floodwaters breaching their businesses and backyards. NIWA says Auckland had its second wettest hour on record, and there were more than 9,000 lightning strikes across the top of the North Island this morning. Fire and Emergency had around 300 flood-related call-outs in the city of Sales. Schools were closed, and for some businesses it wasn't worth opening, and others were left to mop up the water in their shops. Here's our reporter Nick Trubridge and cameraman Nick Monroe with a slightly soggy start to the week.
An hour of chaos in Auckland. Roads turned rivers as stormwater streams down city streets, threatening to breach homes and workplaces alike. The sudden surge closing schools, running amok at Auckland Airport and leaving some businesses battered.
I'm standing just inside the door at Countdown Point Chev, where the rain was so strong that part of the roof has completely caved in. Staff behind me, well, instead of serving customers, they're now involved in a mammoth clean-up effort. Luckily, no one was hurt, but customers, well, they're going to have to find somewhere else to go today.
And finding somewhere else to go meant navigating the city's soaked streets. Just down the road, an intersection has turned into a torrent as cars navigate water nearly over the bumper. The city's shops battling back from multiple lockdowns and traffic light changes, today losing more business as they're forced to keep the doors shut.
The floors everything's completely drenched. A lot of water had come down through where our gutter is, obviously overflowed and just went down the side of the wall and came into our premises. And we're kind of really surprised.
Forget root canals, it's cleanups at a soaked Point Chev dental. Owner Suresh telling us the day's bookings are now on the back burner.
I think our equipment's a bit damaged too, so we're going to have to get technicians in. It's real gut-wrenching, to be honest, but I feel for the people that were in Brisbane and Sydney when we heard about their rain. And compare this to the Ukraine war, this is minor.
And the schools aren't spared either.
So we've closed the school because it's flooded all over the place, and we're all on brooms trying to get it out, but it's still coming.
Further north, Red Beach Principal Julie Hepburn makes an urgent call to the Ministry of Education before running us through the damage.
Well, quite threatening because with the electricity and low-lying electrical gear, etc. So we had to turn off a number of areas for power just to make sure we stayed safe.
She tells us students were sent packing on arrival as the floodwaters encroached.
Our lovely parents have all come back in and collected the children. You can see behind me here the amazing staff have got behind the brooms and they're sweeping up. And as we're sweeping, more water keeps coming, so it's not a 5-minute fix.
The downpours caught many off guard on Monday morning, some Ellerslie locals telling us they were forced into an unplanned dip.
My neighbour phoned me and said, "Can you please come out? I've just seen your bin floating past my house." So I went out there and we were actually running up and down the street, collecting all the neighbours' bins because our road's turned into a river. I had my jandals on and I actually couldn't move at one stage. I thought, oh my gosh, I'm going to lose my jandals. It was actually quite a current coming down our street.
Flooding everywhere. Like the whole streets were flooded. It was bad.
Well, the thunder and lightning was more scary than the water, to be honest.
As the morning wears on, the deluge drops off, but evidence remains, local lots looking more like ponds than car parks. We've now zipped over to Pack and Save Royal Oak. I'm wading through the car park. It's now more shallow creek. The water up well over my ankles. The intense storm also scattering debris through Auckland's domestic pickup, closing it to traffic. Meanwhile, the city's motorways were snarled up, made worse in Waterview, where police closed the main road as a car fire broke out at the local BP. Out amongst all the chaos was Brendan Liu, who had a morning to remember delivering fresh fruit and veg for the family business, KC Liu.
Never experienced like that, sort of like how bad the weather was.
Just 1 hour of absolute mayhem, basically.
Yes, yeah, it was pretty bad for that 1 hour. I actually got soaked in like the first 5 minutes. Yeah.
Monday morning, mayhem. The storm gone as quickly as it arrived as the cost counting and clean-up kick in.
And if you were listening to that on radio, the video from our two Nicks will be up on our webpage. Homai o whakaro, we would love your feedback. Nō reira anei na kaupapa mō te hōtaka nei. What was it like in your area? Did you get hit badly? Whereabouts are you? And were we prepared? Were the drains clear? There was a lot of water over the roads. Let me know your thoughts. Text me, pātui mai 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Search teams are desperately looking for the last person still missing after a fishing charter sank near Cape Reinga. The vessel Enchanter ran into trouble in wild weather, which hammered the top of the Motu last night. It's believed a wave hit the 15-metre vessel, breaking the bridge of the boat. A massive search effort has been taking place since early this morning. While 5 survivors have been found, 4 bodies have also been recovered. Anai te kai ripoata, Anita Blake Person, no te tai tukurau.
Celebrated for its fishing, the town of Manganui was in shock today following news one of its boats had not survived its northern journey.
For that disaster to happen, something must have been a wee bit unexpected up there to happen like that.
The Enchanter ran out of Manganui, where Steve Smith is the harbour warden. He's known the Enchanter's skipper Lance Goodhue for years.
What I am hearing is that Lance and 4 others have been possible in Kaitaia. I have heard that there are 3 people whose bodies have been recovered and 2 are still missing at this stage.
Late this afternoon, authorities announced they'd recovered a fourth body. On Thursday, Lance Goodhue set off with one Northland crew member, Kobe O'Neill, and 8 clients on a 5-day trip to the Three Kings Islands, a trip that takes around 19 hours. Smith says it's a top fishing spot.
The Enchanted normally, along with a few other charter vessels, took crews up to the Three King Islands, and generally it was a great jaunt out for people who want to go charter fishing. And Lance did that job extremely well.
A weather warning went out on Saturday morning, 2 days after the Enchanter had headed out. Last night the trip took a tragic turn. A rogue wave is understood to have hit the boat. Its emergency locator beacon was activated around 8 p.m. and the crew were in distress for several hours. Skipper Lance Goodhue and crew Kobe O'Neill both survived the ordeal. They're understood to have had 8 Auckland-based visitors on board. 3 other survivors were taken to Kaitaia Hospital and another 4 bodies have been recovered. Mark Daniels runs a gallery directly across from the wharf at Mangunui and says the conditions yesterday were terrible.
I witnessed yesterday a very, very wild, rough, chaotic water conditions, and I was a bit surprised at the time that there were people even considering going out, as there were 2 charter boats tied up to the wharf. I don't think they did, and I'm glad of that. However, subsequently I've read that this one boat was out there in that rubbish weather.
The boat sank near the North Cape on Te Aupōuri Peninsula. The chair of Te Runanga Nui o Te Aupōuri, Peter Lucas Jones, says local teams have been assisting with access to the area and providing vital knowledge for the search and rescue efforts.
There's always a level of safety that needs to be considered on any sort of a trip. In and around the Rohe Moana of Te Aupōuri, in the Murimotu area and further afield, the seas can be very unpredictable and the climate can change quite quickly.
The New Zealand Defence Force, along with police and Coast Guard and local fishing vessels, have also been partaking in the search today. A 4th body was recovered late this afternoon. Peter Lucas Jones says while everyone is hoping and praying for the person who's still missing, they are preparing for the worst.
Of course, fishing trips are generally supposed to be fun and exciting events, but on this occasion it has turned out to be very tragic.
And our reporter Nita Blake-Person joins us now live from Kaitaia. Nita, how are the 5 people who were rescued?
Seemingly in physical health, they're okay. They were initially all brought here to Kaitaia Hospital, where they were described as being in a stable condition, but throughout the course of the day, all 5 of those people have been discharged. We know that includes the Enchanter's captain, Lance Goodhue, and his crew member, Kobe O'Neill. So all of those people sent home today in what's a little bit of a bright spot on otherwise quite a grim day for the north.
Thank you, Nita. That's our reporter, Nita Blake-Person. Now, fading light will be the next challenge in the search for the remaining person still missing in waters off North Cape. For the latest on the search, we're joined by Rescue Coordination Centre Officer Nick Burt. Kia ora, Nick. Kia ora, Nick. I think we might have lost Nick. We'll get him back and come back to that interview. It is about 17 minutes past 5. Kia mau tonu mai. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. We are looking to bring you the latest in the search for the one remaining person off that boat that is believed to have sank in the far north overnight in treacherous waters. We're hoping to get through back to the National Rescue Coordination Centre and we'll bring that to you shortly. Russia has called on Ukrainian troops in Mariupol to surrender. In return, Russia has offered to open humanitarian corridors for civilians and soldiers. Russian forces have encircled Mariupol and the city has suffered some of the heaviest shelling since it began its invasion. Andrew McRae reports.
Ukraine is refusing to give up Mariupol, besieged or not. Deputy Prime Minister Irina Vereshchuk says there can be no question of any surrender and that Russia has been informed. An advisor to the mayor of Mariupol, Pyotr Andrei Yushchenko, says Russia's promises can't be trusted.
Every time say the Russian army and Russian government. We work with this situation and we try to evacuate our people. When they say about humanitarian corridors, they really force evacuate our people for Russia.
The Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says he's open to peace negotiations with Vladimir Putin, which he acknowledges have to happen at some stage. But if they fail, he warns the world could face a third world war.
I think that without negotiations, we cannot end this war. If there is just 1% chance for us to stop this war, I think that we need to take this chance. We need to do that. We're losing people on a daily basis, innocent people on the ground. Russian forces have come to exterminate us, to kill us. And we have demonstrated the dignity of our people and our army, that we are able to deal a powerful blow. We are able to strike back.
The United Nations says 10 million Ukrainians have now fled their homes because of the war, almost a quarter of the population. It described the speed and scale of the displacement as unprecedented in recent decades. 3.5 million have fled the country. Matt Reynolds from the UN Refugee Agency, the UNHCR, says it's hard to quantify the needs of 10 million refugees.
The primary need right now is for shelter, so to make sure that people have somewhere to stay, that they have a mattress, that they have a blanket, that they have food and that they have water. It's really, within the country, we're talking about very basic assistance.
The victims in this war are more often than not civilians, including children. The BBC's Wera Davis reports.
In his hospital bed, little Artem stares into emptiness. The Russian shell that blasted shrapnel into his belly also wounded his parents and grandparents as they fled from Mariupol. A victim of the war and not yet 3 years old. Next to Artem, 15-year-old Masha, also from near Mariupol. Her right leg amputated. She and Artem, in some senses, are lucky. They've been evacuated to the city of Zaporizhia. Other victims, adults and children, died where they fell in the streets.
Russia says it has twice used hypersonic missiles in what it still maintains as its special operation in Ukraine. The United States says it can't verify Russia's claim, but US Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin has a theory.
Kind of question why he would do this. Is he running low on precision-guided munitions? Does he have complete confidence in his ability to the ability of his troops to reestablish momentum?
European Union governments will consider whether to impose an oil embargo on Russia over its invasion of Ukraine as they gather later this week with US President Joe Biden for a series of summits designed to harden the West's response to Moscow.
Returning to the far north now, and fading light will be the next challenge in the search for the remaining person still missing in waters off North Cape. For the latest on the search, we're joined by Rescue Coordination Centre Officer Nick Burt. Kia ora, Nick.
Oh, good evening.
Can you bring us up to date with what's happening right now?
I understand that you're aware we've found a fourth person that has been confirmed deceased.
And the search, are you continuing to search now?
The search is currently still ongoing. We still have multiple marine and aviation assets searching for the one missing person.
And what area are you in, and how long do you think you'll be able to keep going for this evening?
We are still searching to the east of North Cape. The entire search area is approximately 200 square nautical miles. We will continue searching until last light, where we will suspend search operations for the evening and then review our search effort from today and resume searching again at first light.
Nick, if we can go back a little bit, can you tell us where the survivors were found, what time they were picked up, and were they in different locations or all together?
So the survivors were found sort of all in the same vicinity. They were winched on board a helicopter at approximately midnight. How
long were they in the water for, do you know?
The survivors were in the water for approximately 4 hours.
And what have they told you about how they ended up in the water?
We haven't had a chance to have a good chat to the survivors at this stage. They have been interviewed by police, but we haven't had a chance to interview them about what happened, and we're not speculating on that at this time.
Sure. Were they wearing life jackets?
Again, we're not speculating on what life jackets they might have been wearing or what life-saving equipment they had.
Right. So nobody observed whether they had life jackets on or not, regardless of the type? Yeah.
No, we're not aware of that at this stage.
So how and when did the coordination centre know that the boat was in trouble?
We got an alert from their emergency position indicating radio beacon at approximately 8 o'clock last night. That's when we first knew that there may be some sort of issue.
And then what happened after that? Was there radio contact?
No, we couldn't get them via either satellite, phone or radio communications.
So the beacon was the only alert you had at 8?
Yeah, that's correct.
And is it your understanding that the boat, the Enchanter, has broken up, or what is the fate of the boat itself?
Look, and again, we're not speculating on what may have happened to the vessel.
And have any of the survivors indicated what happened to the vessel?
Oh, as I said, they are being interviewed by police, and as you can probably appreciate, it's quite a stressful time for them, so they're going to have to take time to process things and work out exactly what happened.
Absolutely. So what were initial complications with the search? Because it was pretty filthy weather, wasn't it, Nick, to start with?
Yeah, that's correct. As you're probably aware, Northland was hit by some heavy rain and strong winds last night. This has affected how we could get the search assets to the scene initially.
And Nick, just before you go, you said you will continue searching until it gets dark. Up in the far north, what time do you anticipate that will be?
Look, we've probably only got an hour to an hour and a half of good daylight left to complete searching.
And the survivors that you winched from the water, how far out to sea were they?
Approximately 2 nautical miles.
Really appreciate your time, Nick. Best of luck this evening. That is Rescue Coordination Centre Officer Nick Burt there. With a decision on the future of vaccine mandates looming, businesses are preparing for what that could mean for them. Cabinet has met today to review mandates, certificates and the traffic light system as a whole, with decisions to be announced on Wednesday. As Louise Tanuth reports, many are ready to see the back of some of the restrictions.
For 4 months, vaccine passes have been the golden ticket to a visit to the hairdresser or a sit-down dinner at our favourite restaurant. But that could all change. The government has already indicated mandates and vaccine passes will no longer be as necessary after the Omicron wave has peaked. These Aucklanders think that time is now.
I'm immunocompromised, so I was very pleased we had mandates and things, but I think it probably is time to change up now.
Yeah, I agree. It should be. It should have been done months ago. Yeah.
Why is that?
Oh, just because I think that people need to be able to get back to their normal lives. 100%.
I know. I mean, if we are past it, then is it really worth it? But I think it was useful at the time.
I personally think with the borders opening up, because we're going to have a lot more international people, it's more difficult because international vaccines don't work. Like I work in hospitals, so we have to scan them. So in order to scan them, they'd have to be the New Zealand one.
Simone Jones from Head Start Total Body Beauty Salon in West Auckland says it would be nice to welcome back all customers to the chair.
It's going to be great to be able to welcome back some of our clients that were unvaccinated back into the salon. I know a lot of them have actually already had their hair done and had treatments done at places that they possibly shouldn't have.
And not having to juggle scanning passes will make things easier.
We had just got our software system sorted to be able to press the button to say that we've cited their scan from the last time. And I said the other day, this is just going to happen now that we've just got it sorted out and we're not going to have to do that anymore.
But regardless of what the new rules will be, she says masks should be here to stay.
We still wear the N95 masks and we're encouraging, we actually have it as a salon policy that all our clients have to.
Roger Young from Fidal's Cafe in Wellington says the thought of no vaccine passes is pretty nerve-wracking.
If we let people into the cafe, are we putting anyone else at risk? I don't really know the science behind that. I would be opening my doors to unvaccinated people as long as my staff and my customers feel safe.
But the chance for more business is one he's desperate to take.
It's just so hard. Every day is so different, and we've got lots of staff off with COVID, and you work so quiet through the week. I was just driving down Cuba Street, and you could just about shoot a gun down the street and not hit anyone. It's just so dead.
That's echoed by owner of Maranui Cafe in Wellington, Bronwyn Kelly, but she says it won't be an instant fix.
I think it's still going to take a wee while for people's change in dining habits to go back to normal. I mean, hopefully we'll start being, especially with the borders reopening, that we'll start to get bums on seats again and not as much takeaway.
She's thankful her staff are comfortable with the risk.
My staff have done an amazing job over the past however months where they've all having to wear masks and they've asked them to be vaccinated. So for them it's been quite tough, but even though there is still anxiety, I think a lot of the staff are quite resilient now, and I feel like they're beginning to feel more comfortable with working with others and having the potential for unvaccinated people to come in.
A decision on the future of vaccine certificates, employment mandates and the traffic light system will come on Wednesday.
Louise Tanuth reporting there. Kia ora e te iwi e Hariaki nei e a checkpoint. Thunderbolts and lightning, pretty bloody frightening. So was Auckland ready for the massive rain dump this morning? High jumper Hamish Kerr bounds into the history books. And is a $50,000 bill for anti-mandate protests in Christchurch a fair call? Homai o whakaro, we'd love your feedback on anything you've heard on the programme this evening. Let us know when you think the time for vaccine passes and vaccine mandates is gone. You can text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Let's get to the headlines now. Ko Iwi anō tēnei.
The government is pledging another $5 million in aid as well as non-lethal military equipment to help Ukraine bolster its defence against Russia. The funding will go mainly to the NATO fund, providing fuel, military rations and first aid kits. It's a shift from New Zealand's humanitarian focus, but stops short of directly sending weapons. The search is continuing for one person still missing after a charter fishing boat sank in wild weather off North Cape last night. 4 bodies have been recovered from the vessel, the Enchanter, which was on a trip to the Three Kings Island. 5 people, including the 2 crew, were winched from the boat at midnight and were discharged from Kaitaia Hospital this afternoon. A GNS volcanologist says pressure building in Mount Ruapehu could lead to an eruption but could equally dissipate without incident. Craig Miller says the volcano's alert level's been raised from 1 to 2 because of tremors which started in the middle of last week. Dr. Miller says the tremors are typically caused by the flow of hot gases into the shallower part of the volcano. The Prime Minister has defended waiting until Wednesday to reveal the timeline for phasing out vaccine passes and mandates. Ministers signed off on a plan today, but Jacinda Ardern says more work is needed to ensure everything is squared away. Cabinet also reviewed the traffic light settings today. The surge in the price of fuel, fertiliser and vehicle imports has led to a record annual trade deficit, with import costs rising at nearly 3 times the rate of increases in exports. Stats NZ data shows a deficit of $8.4 billion for the year ended February, compared to last year's annual surplus of more than $2 billion. Petroleum costs are up more than 40% on last year, and fertilisers, vehicles, iron and steel costs are up between 50 and 60%. Those are the headlines. Our next news and weather is at 6.
Nā mihi iwi, no mai hoki mai. This is Checkpoint, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Let's get to the business news. Ko taku hoa e nai nei, ko Nona Peltier, who joins us now. Nona, Fonterra is quitting Russia, well, it's quit Russian business. What are the details there?
Yeah, so at the end of last month, they suspended their shipments to Russia and then were reviewing their position there. So what they decided was that they would close their Moscow office and they would also withdraw from their joint venture with Unifood in Russia. New Zealand has been exporting to Russia for 40 years, and most of that was butter. And so that isn't going to be resumed anytime soon. Fonterra has decided that it was better to look after their staff for the time being. They're looking to redeploy 7 people that were in Moscow and another 35 that were in St. Petersburg, where they have their Unifood joint venture. They say, though, that the exports to Russia accounts for just about 1% of their total exports, and they are very confident that they can redeploy those products to other markets because of the demand for dairy overall.
And Nona, New Zealand's got a record, not necessarily a positive one. What is it and why?
Yeah, so as people may have just heard in the news, it's about the trade deficit. There was a surge in the price of fuel, fertilizer, vehicle imports, and so forth, and that's resulted in a record trade deficit. So for the month, the deficit was just $385 million, but for the year, it was $8.4 billion. That's quite significant, and a lot of that has been flowing through into our markets and adding additional costs once products land here. And that's because of the Omicron outbreak. It's making the delays on the ports even worse than they were before. And that's primarily because of worker shortages. So a lot of the ships that are coming in are just sitting there waiting as well. That's longer journeys for trucking companies. All of that is adding to prices. So the industry is doing its best, but consumers really should be expecting those prices to come out into their goods and services that are, fueled by imports. And that's anything from fuel to, everything.
Should we take a spin around the markets, Nona?
We closed up 2 points today to 12,178. That's the NZX Top 50 Index. It's a bit mixed in Asia, though. After the weekend, people are a little uncertain about which way things are going with the Russian invasion of Ukraine, as well as just where that's heading in terms of oil prices and so on. The New Zealand dollar did well over the weekend. It hit 69.3 US cents, and at the moment is at 69.1. And the New Zealand dollar against the Australian is dipped a little bit, and that's because of the strength in the Australian at 93.3 Australian, but steady against the British pence at 52.5.
Thanks, Nona. Ka kite, Nona Peltier there with Business News. Time to pay up. Christchurch City Council is chasing anti-mandate, anti-government protesters for $50,000 for costs incurred during rallies in the city. In a series of invoices, the council's billed the local branch of the Freedoms and Rights Coalition, that's linked to Brian Tamaki's Destiny Church, for the cost of traffic control. But so far, no one has paid up. Christchurch City Councillor Jake McClellan joins us now. Kia ora, Jake.
Good evening, Lisa.
Talk us through the bill. What specifically is it for? And I understand it's several invoices.
Yeah, it's across 3 different invoices, and it's all pertaining to traffic management. See, normally when people hold a protest, they let city managers know where they would, what parts of public space they plan to use, and the disruption can be mitigated. In this case, we've had no such information, and that's basically led to a huge ballooning in those costs, simply because we haven't known where to put the traffic management, so we've had to put it in lots of different places.
So why do you think that the Freedom and Rights Coalition is the ones that should pay the bill? I mean, there were hundreds of people there.
Yeah, so we've addressed it to the protest organiser, and it's really his responsibility to pay as the organiser, self-confessed organiser.
How many other protests or protest organisers has the council billed for traffic control or associated costs?
Look, we don't do it often because people don't operate like this normally. Normally, when people want to put their view, they communicate with us. They let us know where they're going to be, and it can be mitigated. These protesters these occupiers, actually, I would call them, have gone out of their way to cause disruption and actually push cost back onto the ratepayer. So it's only fair that they pay for that.
Jake, to the best of your knowledge, has the council ever billed another protest for similar costs?
I'm not aware of that. You'd want to take that up with our staff, though.
Okay, because veteran activist John Minto says you're setting a match to democratic freedoms and that it's a breach of the Bill of Rights to be sending a bill to these people. Your response to that?
Well, look, I can see where he's coming from. He's defending the right to protest. However, this isn't that. These people have sought to be really disruptive, and it's just not acceptable. So I think he's wrong.
Is it just that the council doesn't like the cause?
No, not at all. Not at all. We had similar protests happen at the same time. They did the right thing. They let us know where they were going to be causing disruption, and it was fine. But as I say, these are real costs. They're costs that have been incurred, and I don't think that it's appropriate that the ratepayer should have to foot the bill. Didn't need to be this expensive.
Has anyone paid any of these invoices?
My understanding is no, not to date.
So then what happens? Is it just symbolic, or are you going to chase it?
It's not symbolic. I'm sure our staff will go through all the normal debt collection avenues that they have, but I expect that when we issue an invoice, we mean it. It's appropriate to pay.
Jake, would you support pursuing it either through court or through debt collection?
I'm not going to weigh in on that. I expect that when we send an invoice, our staff do what's appropriate to recoup those costs that have been incurred, and I certainly don't want to see them fall with the ratepayers of Christchurch.
This group says that it's potentially got more protests planned, so have you opened the lines of communication with them to avoid, another bill?
Exhaustively we have. And look, I think...
How so, Jake? Can you just talk us through that a little bit?
I know our staff have made multiple approaches almost every week. I believe they try and get in contact with the protest organisers. And simply if they would communicate and work better with our teams, we wouldn't need to be incurring these costs that they're getting billed for.
So, Jake, if they come to you, let you know the routes in the lead up to whatever future protests are planned, will you waive the 50k bill? Will the council waive it?
These costs have already been incurred. But in future, if they do want to work with our staff, I'm sure the associated damage can be mitigated.
Jake, is the $50,000, is that actually what it cost? Because it sounds like a lot of coin. It's not inflated for effect.
No. These will be true and real costs. As I say, when you don't let people know where you're going to be. And remember, they had an almost month-long occupation in Cranmer Square, so it's quite a lot of disruption's been caused, quite a lot of real cost, and that's being passed on.
Really appreciate your time this evening. Thanks for joining us. That is Christchurch City Councillor Jake McClellan there on the $50,000 worth of bills that they've sent to the organisers of those protests. So far, nobody's paid. Some of your feedback now on the weather. This person, Ray, has got in touch to say, after a gorgeous afternoon, it is now bucketing down again in Orewa, and I think Orewa was hit pretty hard this morning. Some schools in that area were closed, I know. Another person says, in the rain this morning in Mount Eden, it was just like the old days before they drilled a lot more soakage bores, big puddles everywhere, but no kids to soak. They weren't walking today. The main problem was people holding up traffic because of their nerves about crossing the river. And another listener says, just had a huge downpour in Christchurch. On vaccine mandates, we'll just do a couple of these ones. Someone says, absolutely time for passes and mandates to go. And when the South Island has gone through their peak, this listener says, it's only starting here now. So basically indicating they reckon it's too early. And one more from Grant, no mandates and passes must be in place for another 6 weeks yet. Thanks for your feedback. Do keep it coming. You can text us on 2101 or tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. Wellington's water woes look to be getting worse. A new report for Wellington City Council shows its water company can't make it to call-outs on time and says it's now not possible to stop sewage from overflowing into the harbour. But the councils from across the region aren't having the same issues as the city. They say they're managing fine. Our reporter, Kirsty Frame, has more.
A new report from Wellington Water says it's not possible to stop sewage from getting into the harbour. New numbers show that so far this quarter there have been, on average, 1.8 sewage overflows per 1,000 connections across Wellington. That's against the City Council's target of 0, which Wellington Water now says is not achievable. Councillor Sean Rush, who chairs the Infrastructure Committee, says he wants to know why it's not doable.
We recommended that over a period of time, look to eliminate the managed overflows to stop, wastewater going into the stormwater system. And that actually was viewed by our officers as being probably the number one thing that you could do.
Wellington Water is also failing to meet other key performance indicators, with call-out times for overflows taking 3 times longer than anticipated. Councillor Jenny Condie says zero waste water overflows is an aspiration.
I'm obviously not happy with the performance as it is, but I also am realistic that it's going to take us a while for this organisation to get on top of issues that have been developing over a long period of time.
Councillor Diane Calvert says an inquiry into Wellington Water's efficiency is necessary, but the council also needs to take a hard look at itself.
There needs to be an inquiry, certainly, into how Wellington Water are performing right across the region. But what we can do is we can take a specific look at ourselves to make sure that we are doing everything possible and making sure that we don't have any gaps or weaknesses.
Councillor Calvert says the council needs to sort out its water rather than cycleways and crossings. Other councils in the region say Wellington Water's performance has improved because they're paying more. Porirua Mayor Anita Baker says her city had similar infrastructure issues.
I yelled and screamed when I first came in and said, "You're doing a terrible job." And he goes, "Actually, it's what you're paying us. We can't do what you want us to do with the budget." So we've changed the budget, and now we have really good tight time frames. All our water is fixed, quickly within the set time frame. It's great.
Lower Hutt Mayor Campbell Barry says the water agency does a good job in the Hutt, but it is a long game.
The service levels are pretty good. There is still some improvement to be made around responding to leaks and other issues that we have in our city and community, but that's been a growing problem for some time.
Wellington Water says people also have a part to play in keeping sewage from seeping into the harbour. Dry weather wastewater overflows are caused by blockages in the system, by people putting things they shouldn't down the toilet. Only 3 things should be flushed down the toilet: pee, poo and toilet paper.
An update now on the weather event that left parts of Auckland soaked this morning. Auckland Emergency Management Group say some parts of the region received more than a month's worth of rain in one day, with up to 120 millimetres being recorded in some places. Council teams are responding to around 30 critical requests for service relating to downed trees and more than 400 relating to flooding on public land. There have also been a couple of requests from people being displaced. Aucklanders are being told to use the council's Report a Problem online tool or via the Contact Centre for Drains and Trees on public land, or contact insurers for private property. Emergency management will stand down at 6 p.m. and monitor the situation overnight, and we'll have more on this after the 6 o'clock news. It is 14 minutes to 6. You're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Every weekend, hundreds of boy racers are causing chaos on the back roads of Waikato, say locals. Police are investigating an attack on a Fonterra milk tanker which tried to drive through a gathering just north of Hamilton on Saturday. But locals say that's just a part of it and the problem is getting much worse. Sally Murphy reports.
The sound of burning rubber on a rural road. Bruce, a dairy farmer in Gordonton, knows it all too well.
They come in the night and they sit on the intersection right beside our place. It's a crossroads. We can have up to 250 cars here in one session, and they go through the fences and don't tell us. They leave rubbish, lots and lots and lots of rubbish, and we have to pick it all up. The intersection's a mess, always with rubber. We have stock. We cannot have stock down on the near the paddock on the intersection anymore in the weekends because they get petrified by the tyres bursting, the crowd behaviour. They throw bottles, cans at the cows.
Like many farmers in Waikato and elsewhere, Bruce has been putting up with boy races for years. The incident where a Fonterra milk tanker at the weekend was attacked was just the latest round.
Oh, this is a couple of years now, and it's getting worse. I'm surprised it hasn't happened before this. They're just little. We won't. I could use some nice language, but they sit on the road here on this intersection. It's a major road, and they will block it off, and people have to stop and wait for them to finish doing their little show. I wouldn't go out there at midnight. They're abusive.
Bruce says despite countless complaints to the police and council, nothing seems to get done. Further south in Arapuni, rural resident Leslie agrees.
But all the roads around here are plastered with black tyre marks, absolutely plastered.
Driving even in the evening has become dangerous.
My husband has even encountered it driving home from work, at 5 o'clock. on a local country road that he uses every day. Had to get out of the way quickly of somebody doing burnouts at yet another intersection.
The Waikato region has around 10,000 kilometres of local roads, most through countryside, the third most in the country, a tempting target for boy races. Waikato Mayor Alan Sanson says the races can turn up in huge numbers, sometimes 300 or 400 cars at a time, blocking roads and intersections.
I've got to feel sorry for the police here. They're up against it too. These young people are well organised and they don't actually, nobody knows where this is going to happen, and they've got their own Facebook page or their own signalling they use electronically to indicate the location where to congregate, and they come like bees to a pot of honey. And it's really hard for the police to track them. The police have had in the Waikato a dedicated team, which I think is still operational, to actually deal with some of these people, but you've got to realise this is widespread across the Waikato, and there could be a number of events on one night, and at the end of the day you can't prosecute young people for congregating. It's just the activities they undertake you can actually prosecute them for.
Alan Sanson says he was already dealing with another incident when he got news of the Fonterra attack from Saturday morning. He says the Fonterra tanker attack occurred at a regular haunt of races.
Well, my understanding of it is that a number of young people who were undertaking illegal activities on the roading network in relation to boy racer activities stopped a milk tanker because it had the road blocked, and duly as the tanker tried to nudge his way through, they took offence to that and started attacking the tanker. But then one young idiot, I would call him, decided to go and open up one of the valves on the back of the tanker, which allowed raw milk to spill out onto the road and into the waterways.
Police say the behaviour of the people who attacked the tanker is unacceptable. They say they are committed to holding the offenders to account and their investigations are ongoing.
Waikato police have issued a statement saying they are aware of concerns and recognise the distress caused by boy racers. They say they're running Operation Shadow to curb street racing, but say the numbers racing makes it a challenge to intervene. In the last 12 months, they have impounded more than 70 vehicles, which they identified through video sent to police, and they urge anyone with information to call them. The government is sending more money and tactical military equipment to Ukraine, but has stopped short of directly supplying lethal weapons. Cabinet has agreed to pledge a further $5 million to help Ukraine, bringing New Zealand's total financial contribution to $11 million. The money will be contributed directly to the NATO Trust Fund to be spent on fuel, military rations, communications equipment and military first aid kits. Te Piramia Jacinda Ardern says New Zealand has so far not taken up the Ukrainian government's general request to all countries for lethal weapons.
We haven't yet made the decision to add those additional forms of support. One thing I would say is that we have less scope than many countries to provide it, and it would be a fundamental change in approach. It hasn't been removed from the table, but at this stage we believe the non-lethal aid is a difference we can make.
The Defence Force is supplying more than 1,000 body armour plates and roughly 500 helmets and another 500 camouflage vests. Chief of Defence Air Marshal Kevin Short says this equipment is surplus to New Zealand's needs, currently being phased out for lighter modern gear. He says the Ukrainian government had previously declined New Zealand's offer of this gear.
We received a request. We looked at that request and went back and said these are the numbers that we could supply. If you go back a few weeks, they said, no, we need a lot more than that. Now they've come back and said, what you have is accepted, please deliver.
Kevin Short says the gear will likely be sent to Ukraine on Defence Force planes, and talks were underway to see how Australia might help. The way the war has changed Ukraine is being felt everywhere in the country. Although where possible, people are also trying to keep hold of rituals and aspects of normal life. The BBC's Jeremy Bowen reports from the capital, Kiev.
The roar of Ukrainian air defence missiles reverberates through Kyiv's main cemetery. Rest in peace. Not here. Not now. Explosions have felled trees and broken headstones. Alexander Braun, an army volunteer, was killed fighting the Russians 5 days ago, just before what would have been his 27th birthday. Almost no one at the funeral knew Alexander, not the guard of honour or the priest in army green. His commander was the only one from his unit. dressed to go back to the front line only a few miles away. He said they all had to honour him because Alexander's family is not here. His father's in the besieged city of Mariupol. They can't reach him to say his son is dead. Before the war, Alexander was a children's entertainer and illusionist. He went to the front with no real training and was killed less than 2 weeks after he signed up. Close by, graves of people killed fighting Russian-backed separatists since 2014. And these days, the sirens feel routine. It's been quieter the last few days here in the city. The analysis, fear perhaps, is that the Russians are gathering their strength, resupplying, trying to reorganize, getting ready to do something else, to push again at Kyiv. Relative quiet does not mean peace or ceasefire. St. Volodymyr's Ukrainian Orthodox Cathedral was heavy with incense and the pain of war. The Orthodox Church here broke with Moscow in 2018. It was a blow for President Putin, who insists that Ukrainians and Russians are one people in one country who should be in one Russian church.
And let's get to some of your feedback now, coming in thick and fast on vaccine mandates. And wow, you're split down the middle, really. This person says mandates should have a firm end date of all restrictions to signal a welcome flag for international tourists. Paul from Auckland says crazy now to remove the vaccine passes or mandates. We're at peak Omicron. We need to listen to the experts. This one, if Delta is gone, then vaccine passes should be gone. One was made for the other. And Robin's got in touch to say no vaccine passports will mean even fewer people will feel safe to eat out. But overseas visitors without passports mean they'll have to go. Why do people think the desperately quiet restaurants are due to the government mandates? People are choosing to stay at home to avoid infection, says Robin. And Sharon reckons, I go out to a cafe every morning, but as a 62-year-old, and at this stage in the pandemic, I wouldn't be going if the vaccine pass wasn't in use. Keep it coming. Text us on 2101 or tweet us at @CheckpointRNZ. Hamish Kerr is flying high. He's become the first New Zealander to win an Olympic or World Championship high jump medal after claiming bronze at the World Indoor Champs in Belgrade. In a tight competition, Kerr equalled his personal best to finish third equal. Sports editor Stephen Hewson has more.
The 25-year-old Hamish Kerr equalled his personal best of 2.31 metres and coming third equal with Olympic champion Italy's Giacomo Tamberi. It was Tamberi and Qatar's Murtaz Essebasham who decided to share the gold medal at the Tokyo Olympics last year after the pair couldn't be split following 2 hours of competition and both having cleared 2.37 metres. Kerr's success is all the more remarkable though, given it's the first time he's competed indoors.
The track is quite different indoors to outdoors, and so for me it was literally every jump was just trying to adjust a little bit better to the conditions. I definitely don't jump the way that an indoor track really benefits you, so I did have to make a few little technical adjustments, and I literally hit the bar on every single clearance I had. Like, it was just a little bar tickle every clearance. So yeah, I mean, it was cool. I just jumped better and better as the comp got on.
Kerr's performance shattered the 39-year-old New Zealand indoor men's high jump record of 2.16 metres set by Roger Tapuni in 1983. But while the silverware and records are nice, Kerr says they're not the most important things he's gained from his Belgrade success.
I love competing against those guys. They're a great group of dudes, and it's just cool having other guys out there who are sort of at the same level as you, and I think I showed again that I'm really capable of competing against those guys when it really matters. So, I mean, obviously I tied with the Olympic champion, but the two guys ahead of me have never won global medals either. So it's kind of like the new kids on the block coming through, showing the old ones how it's done. So, it's really exciting for the future.
Hamish Kerr has a busy year ahead of him. He's now returning home for 6 weeks of domestic training and competition before heading back to the Northern Hemisphere for the Commonwealth Games, the World Champs and the Diamond League series of track meets. His medal was the second for New Zealand at the Indoor World Champs in Belgrade after shot putter Tom Walsh won bronze on Sunday.
Earlier in the program, I spoke to Jake McClellan, who's Christchurch City Council. They've issued the Freedom and Rights Coalition a $50,000 bill for the anti-mandate protests held in the city for traffic enforcement, they say. And this is your response. Anna says, well done, Christchurch City Council. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. Legitimate protests will not be impacted by this. What's legitimate? That's an interesting question. Another person says these anti-vax groups owe the government a few $1 million for the vaccines we have taken, which protected them during their public tantrum. What's another 50,000? This one, though, says protest is meant to be disruptive. What an idiot. And another person comments, so if I organise a small protest and 10,000 people tag along, I'm going to get a $50,000 bill. Ian says the traffic management plan for the humble Johnsonville Christmas parade is $10,000. I can completely see how Tamaki's faux protest costs $50,000, says Ian. And Helen says $55,000 is fair for the law-breaking, disruption and damage caused by the protesters in Cranmer Square, and we'll have more on this after the news.
RNZ News at 6 o'clock. Good evening, kia ora tātou, ko Iwi Ashton tēnei. The government will send body armour and helmets to Ukraine, as well as $5 million to NATO to help bolster the nation's defence against Russia. The Prime Minister made the announcement this afternoon following a cabinet meeting. Here's our Deputy Political Editor, Craig McCulloch.
The funding will primarily go to the NATO Trust Fund, which is providing fuel, military rations and first aid kits to Ukraine. The Defence Force will also donate more than 1,000 body armour plates and roughly 500 helmets and camouflage vests. The move is a shift from New Zealand's traditionally humanitarian focus, but stops short of directly sending weapons. Jacinda Ardern says that option remains open, but notes New Zealand has less ability to assist in that way than other countries.
The Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, has defended holding back the timeline for phasing out vaccine passes and mandates. Ministers signed off on a plan today, but an announcement won't be made till Wednesday. The ACT Party says there's no reason to keep the public in the dark, but Ms Ardern says some further work is being done to ensure everything is squared away.
There is literally no one that will be impacted by us taking those extra 48 hours because the changes aren't immediate.
Cabinet also reviewed the traffic light settings today. The Mangonui Harbour Warden says something unexpected must have happened to cause the fishing boat disaster in the far north. 4 people died, 1 is still missing, and 5 were rescued after the Enchanter sank off North Cape last night. The Enchanter was skippered by Lance Goodhue, who survived the ordeal. The boat ran out of Mangonui and set off on Thursday on a 5-day trip to Three Kings Islands. Mangonui Harbour Warden Steve Smith has told Checkpoint it's a top fishing spot.
The Enchanter normally, along with a few other charter vessels, took crews up to the Three King Islands, and generally it was a great jaunt out for people who want to go charter fishing. And Lance did that job extremely well.
A rogue wave is understood to have hit the boat. Auckland businesses are counting the cost of yet another day's lost trading, except this time the cause is wild weather instead of a COVID-19 lockdown. Niwa says an hour-long downpour across much of the region this morning was among the wettest on record. Suresh, who owns and operates Point Chevalier Dental, says he's cancelled all appointments for today at least.
The floors, everything's completely drenched. A lot of water had come down through where our gutter is, obviously overflowed and just went down the side of the wall and came into our premises, and we're kind of really surprised.
The wild weather's also closed several Countdown supermarkets, as well as part of Auckland Airport's domestic terminal drop-off zone for a time. The surge in the price of fuel, fertiliser and vehicle imports has resulted in a record annual trade deficit. Stats NZ data shows a deficit of $8.4 billion for the year ended February. A year ago, there was an annual surplus of more than $2 billion, largely as a result of COVID disruptions. For the month of February, there was a deficit of $385 million. Import costs have risen at nearly 3 times the rate of increases in exports. Petroleum import costs are up more than 40% on a year ago, and there have been rises of between 50% and 60% in the cost of fertilisers, vehicles and iron and steel. Fewer schools have reported cases of COVID-19 among staff and students than last week. The virus has disrupted classes at many schools in recent weeks. Our education correspondent, John Gerritsen, reports.
The Education Ministry says 1,649 schools have reported cases among staff or students in the past 10 days, down from nearly 1,900 at the same time last week. However, the number of early childhood services is about the same as last week, at 1,730. In total, schools and early learning services have informed the Ministry of nearly 41,000 cases in the past 10 days, down from more than 46,000 at Monday last week. The percentage of schools reporting infections is declining or stable in all regions, including Auckland, where 74% of schools had recent cases among children or staff.
There are nearly 14,500 new community cases of COVID-19 today, with 9 more deaths and 1,000 people in hospital with the virus. And a GNS volcanologist says the pressure building in Mount Ruapehu could lead to an eruption, but could also pass without incident. Craig Miller says the mountain's alert level has been raised from 1 to 2 because of tremors occurring since the middle of last week. Also, he says the volcano's not responding as expected to the gas flow, which means something's blocking it. Dr. Miller says that could cause an eruption if enough pressure builds, but it's just as likely to dissipate. Mount Ruapehu had a series of eruptions in 1995 and 1996. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, Ricky Swinell talks sport as we head towards the business end of the Women's World Cricket Cup. Ben James calls us from his roadside record store to nominate a homegrown track for your listening pleasure. Alan Scott has an engineering solution for Mars. Should we ever need to build there? It's called Marscrete, and we present Hair and Loathing, Charlotte Cook's new series on female body hair, on Nights with me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
You're back with Lisa Owen on Checkpoint next, but first the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Tuesday. For Northland, Auckland, Waikato and the Coromandel Peninsula, partly cloudy with a few showers. Waitomo, Taranaki and the Central High Country, also Bay of Plenty and Gisborne. Rain with heavy and possibly thundery falls, easing to a few showers from the afternoon or evening. Rain is going to return to Taranaki, Coromandel and the Bay of Plenty tomorrow night. Rain spreading south from Whanganui to Wellington, also Hawke's Bay and Wairarapa, then clearing tomorrow morning, scattered afternoon and evening showers inland tomorrow. Nelson and Marlborough, also rain for you, possibly heavy, easing tomorrow. Rain at times for Bulla and Westland. Canterbury, North Otago, Dunedin and Clutha, cloud is increasing, rain developing this evening, then gradually clearing later tomorrow. Fine for Central Otago, Southland and Fiordland, apart from areas of inland valley fog. And for Te Kohu, the Chatham Islands, cloudy today, fine tomorrow. It's coming up to 7 minutes past 6. We'll have more news headlines for you at 6:30.
Nā mihi mō te rā. No mai hoki mai, this is Checkpoint, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. The record books are being checked, but wild weather brought the worst torrential rain in Auckland's memory this morning. Foul weather hit the city with furious thunder and lightning and torrential downpours. Just as quickly as it struck, it was gone again, leaving behind a significant clean-up job for some. Schools were forced to close due to flash flooding. Some public transport literally ground to a halt, and businesses that can ill afford another hiccup were awash. Emergency services attended hundreds of call-outs for flooding, trees and power lines down as the fast-moving storm barreled down the top of the North Island. Amy Williams filed this report.
The storm swept across Northland before most people left for work, making some roads perilous with surface flooding. Northland Civil Defence Emergency Management spokesperson Murray Soljak says a 150mm deluge closed roads and flooded some houses to the west of Whangarei.
We had a series of thunderstorms through the early hours of the morning that has delivered more than 150mm of rain in a few places. It's resulted in damage and surface flooding to numerous roads throughout Northland and flooding to a limited number of houses and some businesses.
Whangarei Mayor Cheryl Mai says the water was so high in places it stranded residents in their homes. Further south, Auckland residents woke to dark skies, intense rain and mighty thunderclaps. NIWA forecaster Chris Brandolino says more than 9,000 lightning strikes were recorded across the top of the North Island from midnight.
Well over 9,000 strikes, and a lot of those came between 7 and 9 o'clock this morning, when we were seeing hundreds of strikes per hour in some cases for a short time.
Climate stations around Auckland recorded over a month's worth of rain in about 10 hours. Chris Brandolino says in that time 109 millimetres of rain fell at Albany, 91 mils at Western Springs and 93 mils at Mangere. He says the Auckland region normally gets about 85 to 90 mils of rain during March.
You know, a half month to or more of rain in an hour, and you're getting well over a month's worth of rain in 10 hours. So when you're squeezing 31 days into 10 hours, you're going to have problems. And you put that at rush hour, you're going to have major problems, and that's exactly what we had.
The intense rain created widespread flooding, and more than 40 fire crews spent the day attending hundreds of call-outs. Auckland Emergency Management's General Manager Paul Amaral says most call-outs were for flooded basements and fallen trees and power lines.
It's all over Auckland and it's widespread, but there's been no injuries reported that we're aware of.
Leaving a clean-up in its wake, the storm lost severity as it tracked further south over Waikato and the Bay of Plenty regions. Fire and Emergencies says there were only a handful of rain-related call-outs across Hamilton, Cambridge and Tauranga, and the Coromandel region got off lightly. Met Service forecaster Lewis Ferris says the worst is over.
It has dropped off in intensity as forecast as it moved southwards of southern parts of Auckland, also Waikato. It was due to lose a lot of that intensity.
Now the sun's out and Met Service has lifted the severe weather warning, but says Wednesday is likely to bring more stormy weather for much of the North Island.
And check out Amy's piece online. You can see all the photos and footage there too. Auckland Councillor Josephine Bartley's been out and about and joins us now. Kia ora, Josephine. What's it looking like?
Kia ora. Well, it's looking dry so far, thank goodness. But you can see that a whole lot of water has been through the area. Definitely.
Where specifically have you been, Josephine? And are any residential properties been damaged as a consequence, as far as you can tell?
Yes, so I've been checking on most of my area, but the one that's been the worst hit has been Ellerslie. So I've spent a few hours out there today talking to residents whose basements have flooded. Some of them are having to move out for the night because their house is just so, water soaked. But yeah.
Have they said anything to you, Josephine, about the speed at which this hit and the water rose?
Yeah, they didn't. They said things to me like they didn't expect the damage to be so much from just like what started off as little streams of water coming through from the main road, but then it just went so high on their properties.
Where were you during this sort of? I mean, it was basically an hour of mayhem. Where were you? Were you out and about, or were you tucked away inside?
I was in the middle of our council meetings. Once it started to hail down, then I went outside to check and see what was going on. And then once my meetings were finished, I just got out there and assessed the situation, checked on my constituents and businesses.
Is there a problem with drainage in the city? Because there was a lot of water that was going nowhere fast.
Well, I think that's a valid question to ask because I had a lot of residents contact me today saying that the drains hadn't been cleared in their street, which is why they've got the flooding and their rubbish bin is floating down the street. I've been talking to Auckland Transport and our own council about the scheduling of the drains being cleared and whether that is done when we know a storm event is coming. And the response was yes, it does get cleared when there's a storm coming. But perhaps more regularly, I think, needs to be the case.
Because there was a bit of warning, obviously, with the bad weather alert that came out over the weekend. So presumably there was enough time to do something.
Yeah, well, Auckland Transport asked me to send them the streets in my ward that were flooded, and they can check that clearance was done. But, I mean, you see it all the time. It's the same spots that always flood out. So you would expect that there would be extra attention in those areas.
What have the council contractors been up to today, Josephine? There's a bit of sort of debris and branches and what have you around about as well.
Yeah, they've been out there. Like when people have contacted me, I've passed it on to the council department, and the contractors have just gotten out there, dealt with the fallen trees, clearing the drains that they can get to. And then also people contacting me about the power cuts, and it's been really good. They've come back and they said Vector's outside. So, a full credit to the frontliners. It's just like COVID, like your frontline, they're out there working hard. And even if I make this comparison, what COVID identified was the inequities that are out there, right? This storm event highlighted the inequities not inequities, but the deficiencies in our stormwater system.
Really appreciate your time, Josephine. Thanks for joining us. That's Josephine Bartley, Auckland City Councillor there, who's been out and about and, as she said, talking to people in Ellerslie mainly about flooding on their properties. It is 6:15. You're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Christchurch Council is setting a match to democratic freedoms, according to veteran activist John Minto. In invoices totalling $50,000, the council's billed the local branch of the Freedoms and Rights Coalition, that's linked to Brian Tamaki's Destiny Church, for the cost of traffic control during several rallies in the city. John Minto, who led protests against the 81 Springbok tour and has rallied for various social causes over the years, says the council charges are a breach of the Bill of Rights, and he joins us now. Kia ora, John. Why do you think this protest is being charged?
Well, that's a really good question. I'm not aware of any council anywhere in the country charging anybody for traffic management over the last 50 years. It's the first time I've ever seen it take place, and I'm really surprised. And I think it is. The council has no role in moderating civil and political rights. The council's role is to simply, in fact, facilitate those rights being expressed. In this case, they're doing the opposite.
So why do you think they're going after this particular group?
Well, I think because for most people in Christchurch, in fact, most people in New Zealand, Destiny Church is not regarded very highly, and the protests that they were organising were certainly irresponsible in that they were, events which could easily have spread the COVID virus. So they were irresponsible, and they shouldn't have done what they did. But the fact is, they were taking part they were exercising their right to protest. And even if we disagree with what they did and how they did it, there's no way that the council should be trying to charge them $50,000. You've
raised race. Is race an issue in this?
Well, I mean, 30 or 40 years ago, you might have said it was, but I don't think it can be. But I think it's the council. I think here in Christchurch and probably councils throughout the country have this kind of user pays ideology, which is driven through lots of council policies for a long time. And I think the council bureaucracy simply saw this as an opportunity to extend user pays. And
but if that was the case, John, wouldn't they do it with every protest that comes to town? And as you've pointed out, they don't. So here's the thing. Here's their point. They say that the organisers should have come to them and they could have worked out a traffic plan. Then they wouldn't have to carry the cost. Is that a fair call from the council?
No, it's not a fair call. The council doesn't have any role in, as I said before, in moderating civil and political rights.
But what about traffic management? They do have a role in traffic management, though, don't they, John? Which is what they say they were trying to do during this.
Yeah, no. What the protest organisers should do is to contact the traffic management section of the police, and this is standard practice. Send them a note, say, look, we're going to have this protest. It's from here to here at this particular time. And leave it to the police to make the decision about what traffic management things they're going to put in place to keep everybody safe. That's what the organisers should have done, but the council has no role in that. And the council's job is simply to, I guess, work with the police and make sure that they implement whatever is needed to keep everybody safe.
You say it's setting a match to democratic freedoms. Is it really, though? Because people just won't pay and they'll protest anyway, won't they?
Well, yeah, people. That's true, and I hope that is the case. But I think if the council got away with this, then the only people able to organise protests would be people who have deep pockets to before they march, having to pay tens of thousands of dollars in this case for some sort of traffic management. And I think that's fundamentally wrong, and I think the council has really missed the point here. It's about the democratic rights of people to protest.
Or, John, they just need a phone to call police, as you said, and speak to the traffic management unit. They don't need deep pockets. They just need to call ahead, by all accounts.
That's what they should do. Yeah, they should let the police know. But even if they don't let the police know, I mean, you have to remember that there are lots of people in New Zealand that don't have the same confidence in our public institutions like the police and the council and the government that middle class New Zealanders have. And so I don't think even that that's no reason in itself for people to be charged tens of thousands of dollars for exercising their democratic right.
So do you just simply think that the City Council just doesn't like the message that the protesters had, so therefore they issue them with a series of 3 bills totalling $50,000?
I think that's the reason. I think they thought this group was so unpopular that they might get away with it. But it's not the council's role to just say, well, this group's going to have to pay management charges. This group's not. No group should have to pay in any circumstances.
I note that you've had an email from the council, right, and they've said to you that there are potentially more protests planned from this group, and that they are encouraging the organiser, who they identify as Derek Tate. They say if he just comes in and has a meeting with the council staff about plans, future protest plans and traffic management, that they can find a solution forward. That's reasonable, isn't it, John?
Well, they should communicate that directly with Mr. Tate, if that's the case. But but there again, if he chooses not to engage with them, I see no reason. I personally see no reason why he should. And as I've said before, it's not the council's role. I think it's the role of the traffic management section of the police to be involved in this. The council should keep right out of it.
Nice to talk to you, John. Thanks for joining us. That is John Minto there. Let us know your thoughts, 2101 on text. In the Ukrainian city, Kiev, nearly 2 million people have fled in the past few weeks as Russian forces approach and launch artillery strikes on the outskirts of the city. But many have stayed to help in whatever way they can. The BBC's Lise Doucette met 2 people joining the effort to boost the city's morale.
In the heart of Kiev, in St. Sophia's Square, thousands of tulips. A trident takes shape, a 3-pronged spear.
It's our symbol. It's symbol of Ukraine, and once more, a symbol of peace and of our country. For one side, we want to be to stay in peace, but for another, all of us ready to stay and to defend our country.
And so many people have left Kiev,
yes,
especially women and children. Why are you still here?
I don't want to go anywhere. My grandfathers, mothers were born and died in city, and for me, Kiev is my heart. And I understand, and I am absolutely sure that people who have small children, they must leave, because it's not possible to stay when bombs I don't know, on the land.
When you see what's happening to Mariupol, to Kharkiv, to so many other parts of the country, does it worry you this could happen here?
It's very big pain in my heart, and daytime. I'm a restaurateur, and in daytime we are cooking for our people. In the nighttime I'm praying. It's my way how to support these people. Also, I do a lot of volunteers work with people who come from Mariupol, from Bucha, from Irpin, from Chernigov, from Kharkov. everybody doing what the best what he can do on their place.
Well, people from across the city are being drawn to this intriguing installation, including a very popular rock star, Oleg Skripka.
Hi.
Well, why are you here?
A lot of Ukrainians left the country, but I think we have to stay here to support our land and to support Ukrainians and support our warriors. And it's my country, it's my city, and now we're in the war, but mostly important is the culture, and it's the action installation with flower, because the flower is the symbol of freedom.
So are you fighting this war with your culture, with your music?
I found the channel to support emotional for people.
You're trying to inspire them.
Yeah.
Because music can't stop Russian tanks.
Absolutely, absolutely, we do it. Ще не вмерла в Україні ні слава, ні воля. Ще нам, браття українці, усміхнеться доля. Слава Україні!
That's what you see, that's the power of music. He claims it can stop Russian tanks, but certainly it does inspire Ukrainians, and they are looking for inspiration at this time. A devastating war now in its first month, and no sign it's going to end anytime soon.
In Australia, nothing says a looming federal election campaign like politicians posing in high-vis vests offering cash handouts. Funding for big transport projects is a popular promise across the ditch, but a new report has found that only one of the coalition's 71 transport promises at the last election had an approved business case. The ABC's Stephanie Dalzell explains.
Eye-watering petrol prices are fuelling a new ad campaign from the nation's peak motoring body, the Australian Automobile Association.
Transport costs slowing you down? You deserve more for the tax you pay.
The 44-cent a litre fuel excise raises at least $11 billion for the federal government each year, but analysis by the association calculates only about half has been spent on transport projects. Managing Director Michael Bradley wants whoever wins government to promise that 100% of the fuel excise will be pumped back into the sector.
People don't like high petrol prices. People don't like big taxes on fuels, but they'll live with both if they can see that money being reinvested into projects that make their transport network safer, more affordable.
Big ticket infrastructure projects are often vote winners and popular election campaign promises from both sides of politics. A separate report by the Grattan Institute has found during the 2019 election, just one of the coalition's 71 transport promises, valued at $100 million or more, had a business case approved by Infrastructure Australia. For Labor, it was just 2 of 61 projects. The report's author is Marion Terrell.
Pork barrelling wastes money, it's unfair, and too often it's about governments of both persuasions going out and spending a lot of taxpayer money on things that are not actually the Commonwealth's job to do.
It was supposed to be a high-tech business hub creating thousands of jobs, but now the High Court in South Africa has halted the construction of Amazon's new complex outside of Cape Town. The purpose of the site was to serve as the company's Africa headquarters, but descendants of the country's earliest inhabitants campaigned against it because they say the location is on sacred land. The BBC's Richard Hamilton reports.
Construction had already begun on the $262 million complex located on a site that was previously a golf course. The Khoi and the San were the earliest inhabitants of South Africa, the former living there as pastoralists more than 2,000 years ago, and the latter roaming as hunter-gatherers for tens of thousands of years. Some of their descendants had objected to the River Club development, where Amazon would be the main tenant, but which also includes plans for a hotel, offices and homes. It lies at the confluence of 2 rivers that are considered sacred, the Black and Liesbeek rivers. Taurik Jenkins has been leading the campaign against the project.
This soil beneath our feet is when in 1657 very serious developments occurred that would start the complete smashing and conquering of indigenous communities and South Africa as we know it by colonial powers. If we lose the river, we lose everything. If we lose this embankment, we lose everything.
The High Court in Cape Town has ordered the property developers to hold meaningful engagement and consultation with the Khoi and San representatives, although not all of them are against the project, with many welcoming the opportunities for employment. The city's authorities said it had followed due process for the complex, which would also include a heritage centre and indigenous garden. The developers also said it was crucial to attracting much-needed investment as South Africa emerges from the pandemic.
And the last of your feedback before we head off on the anti-mandate protests in Christchurch and the council billing them $50,000. Helen reckons it's fair for the law-breaking disruption and damage caused by the protesters. Surely Destiny Church can afford it, she reckons. And Sue says, hey, tell John Minto that people who organise any public events, even if they're charitable, have to pay for transport, for traffic management. And he may not be aware of this because it's a fairly recent development, says Sue. Thanks for your feedback. That's pretty much all we've got time for. The late news team's going to keep you updated throughout the night. And don't forget, if you missed anything on the program, check out Checkpoint on Spotify, Apple or wherever you get your podcasts. Ko te kaupapa tuatahi pōpō tomorrow from 5 a.m. Flooded car engines, garages and basements underwater. First Up asks what's insured and what is not in extreme weather events. That is something that may be pretty helpful after today. Catch you tomorrow, same time, same place.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. Hi, I'm Evie Ashton. The Prime Minister says a timeline for phasing out vaccine passes and mandates will be announced on Wednesday. New Zealand will send non-lethal military equipment and a further $5 million to Ukraine to strengthen its defence against Russia. Only 5 of the 10 people on board a fishing charter which sank off North Cape last night have been rescued. And COVID-19 cases in schools and early childhood centres have dropped from 46 to 41,000 in the past 10 days. Those are the headlines. Our next news and weather is at 7.
This morning on First Up, a Northlands GP who resigned last week hits out at health authorities over how the primary care sector is treated.
We did have the luxury of having 6 months watching the rest of the world go through stuff, yet still we're flying by the seat of our pants.
And Weather Watch's Philip Duncan did nothing to reassure me about the stormy weather and the location of my house.
That part of Auckland, the Waitawata Harbour, the northwestern side of the city, that is definitely what we call our tornado alley.
Batten down the hatches with me, Nathan Rarity for First Up, tomorrow morning from 5 on RNZ National.
Kia ora, Nathan. Actually, we've got something that you did this morning that we're playing in a few minutes from now on RNZ National because it's been getting a lot of hits on the website. An interview that Nathan had with James Stewart of Gemini Consulting about the reopening of the Ducks Deluxe pub in Christchurch, which was badly damaged by the February 2011 earthquake. Ahead of that, the detail, and tonight's detail is about Lisette Raymer and Dom Panett, a couple of journalists who witnessed Russia's invasion of Ukraine firsthand.
There was one woman that we met at the Lviv train station, and she just stared down the barrel of the camera crying and said,
"It's really terrible. I was safe for our friends in all country. Help for us, help for Ukraine, because the Russian people kill us about nothing.
Killing us for no reason."